Julian Hartley and Ananya Rao entered marriage as a symbol of wealth, love, and new life. Yet behind closed doors, a hidden truth began to tighten its grip, setting in motion a silent chain of events that would end in betrayal, fear, and an unthinkable crime. Julian Hartley's name carried weight across Australia. He was known as a self-made billionaire who turned remote land into vast mining empires, a man praised for discipline, intelligence, and flawless public control. Newspapers often described him as reserved but brilliant, someone who preferred boardrooms over parties and silence over attention. When news broke that he had married Ananya Rao, curiosity spread quickly. She was Indian, graceful, and noticeably younger than Julian. The relationship appeared unexpected, yet people framed it as a modern love story that crossed borders and cultures. Their wedding was private, held away from cameras, reinforcing the image of a powerful man protecting something precious. Soon after, Ananya became pregnant, and the story shifted into one of legacy and family. To outsiders, Julian finally seemed human. Behind the glass walls of their oceanfront mansion, life felt very different. Julian valued order above everything. His home ran on schedules, security systems, and strict routines. Staff were instructed to keep interactions brief and professional. Privacy was not a preference for him. It was a rule. Ananya entered this world quietly, believing love required adjustment. She had left her family, her city, and her familiar rhythms behind in India, trusting that the sacrifice would lead to stability. At first, Julian was attentive in his own controlled way. He arranged the best doctors, the safest transport, and ensured nothing unpredictable entered their lives. Yet warmth was rare. Emotions were treated like weaknesses, something to be managed rather than shared. As Ananya's pregnancy advanced, her world became smaller. Julian discouraged unnecessary outings, citing safety concerns. Calls to her family grew shorter. He insisted stress was dangerous for the baby and framed isolation as protection. Ananya believed him. She filled her days with reading, journaling, and imagining the child she carried. The silence of the house often felt heavy, but she assumed it was part of Julian's personality. What she did not see was how closely he watched everything. Julian noticed changes in her routines, tracked appointments, and reviewed documents repeatedly. His mind was always calculating, always searching for certainty. Julian's success had been built on control. Every contract, every deal, every number had to make sense. He trusted data more than people. Marriage, however, introduced variables he could not fully predict. While the world saw a powerful man preparing for fatherhood, Julian was already restless. He spent late nights reviewing personal records and legal files, telling himself it was about protecting the future. The pregnancy amplified his obsession with legacy. The idea of something tied to him forever demanded perfection. Ananya sensed distance growing between them. Julian became quieter, colder, and easily irritated. Small disruptions seemed to unsettle him more than before. He avoided eye contact and withdrew into his study for hours. She blamed stress, believing the pressure of wealth and responsibility weighed on him. She had no reason to suspect that a hidden detail from her past was about to collide with Julian's need for absolute control. What began as a private union built on trust was slowly turning into something fragile, shaped by fear, secrecy, and an unspoken tension that neither of them fully understood. The shift began quietly, almost invisibly. Julian had asked his legal team to prepare documents for a long-term trust, something meant to secure his unborn child's future. It was a routine process for someone like him, involving background checks, identity verification, and cross-border records. Julian believed nothing unexpected could surface. His life was documented, audited, and measured in numbers. Ananya's records, however, came from a different system, spread across countries and agencies. When the first inconsistency appeared, it seemed minor, almost irrelevant. A date did not align. A year appeared twice in different forms. Julian noticed immediately. Instead of dismissing it, he became fixated. He requested deeper verification under the excuse of legal accuracy. Files arrived slowly, each one feeding his growing unease. The more Julian read, the more the picture shifted. Ananya was older than she had claimed. Not by a single year, but enough to matter to him. The discovery did not anger him at first. It unsettled him. His mind returned again and again to how and when they met, replaying moments and searching for signs he believed he must have missed. The idea that something about his wife was unknown made him feel exposed. Julian did not see the issue as a simple misunderstanding. To him, age represented honesty, control, and public image. His reputation had been built carefully, and he believed the world judged everything attached to his name. The thought that journalists, investors, or rivals could one day uncover this detail terrified him. In his thinking, the truth itself mattered less than the fact it had been hidden. He began to interpret the pregnancy differently. What once felt like continuation now felt like consequence. His behavior changed rapidly. He canceled social plans and avoided public events. Medical appointments for Ananya were rescheduled or delayed. Julian told himself he was protecting her from stress, but in reality he was buying time to think. He reviewed laws related to inheritance, marriage fraud, and parental rights. Each search pushed him further into isolation. His nights grew longer, filled with calculations rather than sleep. Ananya noticed the distance. Julian barely looked at her now. His concern felt procedural rather than caring. She sensed tension but could not understand its source. She believed the pregnancy had simply overwhelmed him. She focused on staying healthy, believing patience would restore balance. What she did not know was that Julian had already reframed their entire relationship in his mind. He no longer saw a partner. He saw a risk. The age discovery spread through Julian's thoughts like a slow infection. He questioned everything, even moments that had once felt genuine. His trust collapsed inward, replaced by suspicion. Instead of confronting the issue openly, Julian retreated deeper into his private logic. The more he tried to regain control, the more distant he became from reality. A single number on a document had not just challenged his belief in Ananya. It had shaken the foundation of how he understood power, legacy, and himself. Julian's world narrowed to patterns, screens, and silent routines. What began as discomfort hardened into obsession. He started monitoring every detail of the house, convincing himself it was necessary. Security logs were reviewed daily. Camera angles were adjusted. Entry records were double-checked, even when nothing appeared wrong. He told himself this was standard practice, the same discipline that had built his empire. In truth, it was fear disguising itself as control. Ananya moved through the house unaware that her presence was now treated like data to be observed rather than a life to be shared. Julian limited Ananya's access to finances, claiming it was safer to centralize accounts during the pregnancy. Communication with the outside world became filtered through him. Calls were shortened. Visits were postponed. He framed each restriction as protection, but the underlying reason was distrust. He feared exposure, not harm. The pregnancy no longer represented family. It symbolized permanence, something he could not reverse if the truth ever surfaced publicly. During long nights, Julian researched legal outcomes and historical cases involving identity disputes. He convinced himself that deception, once proven, erased moral obligation. His thinking became rigid and distorted. Instead of considering the emotional weight of his actions, he reduced everything to outcomes and liabilities. He reviewed his will repeatedly, editing clauses and contingencies. The unborn child, whom he had once imagined inheriting his legacy, now appeared in his plans as a complication rather than a future. Ananya sensed her isolation deepening. The house felt colder even in daylight. Julian's presence no longer brought reassurance. She noticed his eyes rarely rested on her face. His touch disappeared entirely. Still, she believed endurance was part of love. She spent her time preparing quietly for motherhood, arranging baby items, writing plans, and documenting her thoughts in a private journal. Those pages were filled with hope mixed with confusion, but never fear. She trusted that time would soften whatever distance had grown between them. Julian, meanwhile, had crossed an internal line. His thoughts shifted from uncertainty to resolution. He believed problems existed to be solved, not endured. In his mind, the situation demanded finality. He mapped the house's rhythms, identifying moments when staff were absent and systems could be adjusted without raising alarms. His planning was calm, deliberate, and frighteningly rational. There was no emotional storm, only calculation. As the pregnancy advanced, Julian's sense of urgency increased. Each passing day felt like a narrowing window. He interpreted normal medical risks as signs of impending exposure. His paranoia reshaped reality, turning imagined futures into immediate threats. He convinced himself that decisive action was the only way to restore order. The thought of consequence barely registered. His wealth had always shielded him, reinforcing the illusion that he could shape outcomes to his will. Ananya remained unaware of the danger surrounding her. She trusted the structure of her life, the security of the home, and the man she had married. The silence that filled the rooms masked the truth. What appeared outwardly as a controlled, private life was, in reality, the final stage of a carefully constructed collapse. The morning Ananya was found unresponsive, the house felt unusually quiet. The stillness was broken only by the arrival of emergency services, called by Julian himself. He appeared composed, measured, and visibly restrained, presenting the image of a grieving husband facing sudden tragedy. He attributed her death to complications related to pregnancy, a claim that initially seemed plausible. Given Julian's status and influence, authorities approached the situation carefully. There was no immediate sign of struggle, no obvious disruption to the home's pristine order. On the surface, it looked like a devastating medical event. That impression did not last long. Medical examiners noted inconsistencies that could not be explained by natural causes. Subtle physical indicators suggested external involvement. The timeline Julian provided did not align perfectly with forensic findings. Investigators requested full access to the property, including digital security systems. Julian complied without hesitation, confident in his preparation. However, confidence could not erase data. Surveillance footage revealed unexplained gaps during critical hours. System logs showed manual overrides that had not been disclosed. Each anomaly raised new questions. As the investigation expanded, Ananya's background came into focus. Authorities contacted her family in India, who described her as hopeful, excited about motherhood, and deeply committed to her marriage. They shared concerns she had expressed about increasing isolation and emotional distance, though she had never suggested fear. Her personal journal was recovered, offering a glimpse into her inner world. The entries revealed patience, optimism, and confusion, but no indication of health issues severe enough to explain sudden death. The contrast between her written words and Julian's account deepened suspicion. Digital forensics uncovered Julian's private research history. Searches related to inheritance law, marital deception, and methods that left minimal physical evidence painted a troubling picture. Financial records showed recent adjustments to trusts and beneficiary structures, all finalized shortly before Ananya's death. Investigators began to see motive where none had initially appeared. What seemed like a personal tragedy now looked like a calculated act shaped by obsession and fear of exposure. Public attention grew rapidly. Media outlets questioned how a powerful billionaire's wife could die under such circumstances without immediate accountability. Pressure mounted on authorities to proceed without favoritism. Julian's calm demeanor, once interpreted as strength, began to appear rehearsed. Experts noted his lack of emotional variance during questioning, a detail that stood out against the gravity of the loss. The pregnancy became central to the case. Medical specialists confirmed that Ananya had been healthy, and the unborn child showed no signs of complications prior to her death. This revelation shifted the narrative completely. The investigation was no longer about unexplained loss but about intent. Piece by piece, the image of a controlled, successful man protecting his family unraveled, revealing someone driven by the need to erase a perceived flaw at any cost. The case moved from quiet inquiry to formal accusation, setting the stage for a trial that would expose everything Julian had tried to conceal. Julian Hartley's arrest marked the end of his carefully constructed image. The man once praised for discipline and intelligence now stood accused of murdering his pregnant wife. The courtroom became the final place where his need for control was tested. Prosecutors presented the case methodically, focusing not on emotion but on evidence. They outlined how a simple discovery had escalated into obsession. The age discrepancy, though legally insignificant on its own, was framed as the trigger that fractured Julian's sense of identity and power. It exposed how fragile his authority truly was. Experts testified about the pattern of isolation Ananya experienced, explaining how control can quietly transform into coercion. Digital records were laid out in detail, showing Julian's searches, financial restructuring, and manipulation of security systems. Each piece fit into a larger narrative of intent. The absence of panic, the absence of disorder, and the precision of his actions painted a picture of planning rather than accident. Ananya's journal was introduced as silent testimony. Her words reflected trust, patience, and hope, standing in stark contrast to the cold logic that had guided Julian's decisions. The defense attempted to portray Julian as overwhelmed, emotionally fractured, and reacting under stress. However, the timeline worked against him. The gradual buildup of preparation, combined with calculated legal moves, weakened any claim of impulsive behavior. The court emphasized that intelligence and wealth do not excuse moral failure. The pregnancy, meant to symbolize new life, became the most powerful reminder of what had been taken. The unborn child, whose future Julian claimed to protect, was instead erased by his fear of exposure. Public reaction was swift and intense. The case resonated far beyond Australia, sparking discussions about power dynamics, control, and how isolation can mask danger. Many questioned how someone surrounded by privilege could commit such an act without immediate detection. Others focused on Ananya's vulnerability, living far from home, dependent on a man who measured relationships like assets. Her story became a warning about trust placed in unchecked authority. The verdict was clear. Julian Hartley was found guilty of murder. The sentence stripped him not only of freedom but of legacy. His wealth could no longer shield him, and his name became synonymous with betrayal rather than success. Ananya's life, though tragically short, gained meaning through the truth revealed in court. Her family ensured her story would not be reduced to a headline. The case closed with a reminder that control without empathy leads to destruction. Behind the glass walls, private jets, and polished reputation was a man undone by his inability to accept imperfection. The crime did not happen in a moment of rage but through a slow erosion of humanity. In the end, justice spoke where silence once ruled, ensuring that the truth could not be buried alongside the victim.